The Toronto Raptors have the Raptors have 4 ways to add talent in this month's NBA draft, either through their 19th pick, their 31st pick in the undrafted heap, or by trading up. And I want to explore a few of the 3 of those options. I'm not going to explore the trading up option because I'm not going to be talking about players that I think will be available, that won't be available past 19. But I think the Raptors are in a really good part of the draft. And I just have this streaking suspicion that an international player, potentially one with an injury history, might slip. Um, Someone might not test well. The truth is, I think that a lot of draft season comes down to smoke and mirrors. A lot of guys are on their best behavior. Guys who maybe had character issues are like primed and they're having like this very great interview session, and people are like, oh, maybe all that stuff we've heard about for 5 years is not true. Um, there are guys who maybe have had weight concerns or conditioning concerns that come in and then they're in tip top shape and they test super well, and everyone's like, okay, and there's a recency bias, right? You've heard that this guy can't shoot. He comes into your gym and he knocks down every single three pointer, and you might start to second guess your scouting and say, oh well, he's 21 years old. He just got a lot better. The truth is, the Raptors scouted early, right? With this draft, they have been scouting for years, and I think that there are a few teams out there that maybe be late to this because they've interpreted that this is a weak draft. But the Toronto Raptors set themselves up. Even last year, they were very familiar with this draft, how it was going to break down. That's why they felt comfortable trading a top 6 protected pick for Jakob Poeltl. Granted, not the greatest move. Probably would love to have that pick back, but nevertheless, that's why they felt comfortable trading that pick, because they thought there was no way in hell they weren't going to convey a top 6 protected pick, and that's exactly what ended up happening. Um, a lot of people wonder why the Raptors traded that pick as top 6 protected. It's such a weird protection. Most teams, protect top 3, top 5, top 12, top 14, whatever. Top 6 protection was basically if the Raptors, the worst case scenario that the Raptors envisioned, I believe, for 2023, 2024 was that they were going to finish in the play-in, right? They assumed when they added Jakob Poeltl with Fred VanVleet, bringing back Fred VanVleet, having Pascal, OG, Scotty's ascent, etc., that the worst thing that could possibly happen is they finish in the play-in, and then they end up like, and they protected top 6 just in case they won the lottery or something, that they wouldn't have to convey like a top 3 pick or top 4 pick to the Spurs. But that top 6 protection was never under the assumption that the Raptors would legitimately finish 6th or 7th in the league. That was crazy. And, obviously the Raptors underperformed. And, anyways, long story short, the Raptors have been familiar with this draft for a very long time, and they have targets. And I believe that there are players that maybe will rise up boards and that will push some of their targets down. So, because none of the Raptors' targets right now, in my opinion, are doing anything incredible to raise their stock. So, I want to go through 12 players that I believe will be in that range, and we'll show a few clips of them and we'll talk about how they fit. Okay. So, at pick 19, I'm going to look at 5 big guards and diverse wings. Okay. Now, there's a picture of Isaiah Crawford here, largely because we're going to talk about Isaiah Crawford at some point later in this video, and because I really, really love, I love Isaiah Crawford. There's a couple of guys we're going to talk about in the undrafted heap as well. 3 guys actually we're going to talk about in the undrafted heap. So it's going to be 5 guys at 19, I think 3 guys at 31, and 3 guys in the undrafted heap. Okay, so enough rambling. Let's get to it. Okay, so the first big guard that we're going to talk about is Isaiah Collier from USC. Now, Isaiah Collier is a very interesting player, right? Really highly recruited high school player. A lot of people saw him as a top 5 player, but then he goes to USC and he struggles. He struggles with his shooting. It was a massive letdown. Some of his pull-up shooting, catch and shoot shooting was not great. I don't think his form is broken at all. I just think he had a really tough shooting season. He struggled with defense and he struggled with impact overall. He didn't have the impact that you would typically assume for one of the top 5 freshmen in the country. And while, okay, we can say Bronny James and DJ Wagner suffered a lot more, I think Isaiah Collier suffered a lot as well. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of a guy like Isaiah Collier? Well, in theory, his biggest advantage would be his strength at his position, like that low center of gravity, and his playmaking and his craftiness and his overall skill level, right? He has a really good, we're going to use the Ringers draft guide for most scouting whatever Kevin O'Connor wrote. I think it's just really well laid out and very easy to understand. It has all the graphics and stuff. So we're just going to use that. We're going to scroll through and we'll read through some of it, and we'll just talk about how someone like Isaiah Collier and the subsequent players would actually fit into the Toronto Raptors team philosophy. So, and I'm not going to read this all out. You can definitely read it, by stopping the video or coming back to it later, or by going to the Ringer Draft Guide and reading it yourself. So the comparison here, Tyreke Evans, Emmanuel Mudiay, I don't really see that. Both guys were a little bit bigger than Isaiah, but I certainly understand why some people have compared him to a guy like Stephon Marbury, etc. He's not anywhere near as good as those guys right now. If you're the Toronto Raptors, you have to buy in long term to the belief, right, that his playmaking will become that good because he is a really good passer. I watched 7 games of his total. So I got a good read on Bronny James, but I also got a pretty good read on him. And instead of watching the highlights, where, someone is dissecting, okay, this is the bad stuff about Isaiah Collier, this is the good stuff about Isaiah Collier. So you get some ideas about, you get better. Yeah, I think you get a better idea of the player when you watch full games. And I think some of his advanced reads, the attention that he is able to generate, again, USC plays a pretty tough schedule. And, I just think that he is so talented. He's so incredibly talented as a playmaker. I think like his ability to suck a second or third defender to the ball and then sometimes you try to look at some of those mistakes, right? You see a player make a mistake defensively or offensively or with a bad turnover or with a foul, and you say, what were they trying to do? What was he trying to do there? Was it a good idea, right? Like you're trying to understand the brain, because ultimately, these are 18, 19, 20 year olds we're talking about. They aren't going to have the experience and the reps down. So with some coaching, you try to understand that. So the one thing that, comes up time and time again is he had the right idea a lot, right? He decelerates, like he has like this shifty way of handling himself, which makes me think that there is a way for him to be very successful in the NBA. He has a pretty plus wingspan. It's not elite. It's not quite Donovan Mitchell, 6'9", 6'10" wingspan, but he has a pretty decent wingspan. And yeah, while he's not a great team defender or an individual defender or a point of attack defender right now, I think with some additional buy-in, he has the athleticism and the tools maybe to fix some of his lateral stuff. He's not a super athlete. I think sometimes when people see him, they assume that he's like some sort of like above the rim, high flyer, and he's really not. But he's crafty and he finds ways. Um, you know, again, we try to look at all samples, right? He was a pretty good shooter in AAU, right? So there is that. But then his free throw shooting is not the greatest. And so you have to consider that as well. So, um, again, I think high turnovers are a really good thing. I think the pedigree that he's had, the confidence that he plays with, I think there's that other element of it too. The confidence he has, he doesn't get rattled too easily. I like his confidence in late game situations. And even if like we can say that his mechanics are a little bit faulty on his jumper and maybe he's picked up some bad habits, maybe he's just young enough that you can fix some of those bad habits and get some buy-in defensively. Ultimately, with a development coach like Jama Malalela and Messiah, with Darko Rajakovic, I trust these guys to be able to mold him into a better version of himself. I think he fits some of what the Raptors need at the backup guard in terms of physicality. I don't necessarily love the fact that him and Emmanuel quickly won't be eligible necessarily to play together, and that's sometimes why I prefer an even bigger point guard. But he's not like necessarily undersized at the point guard position. There are plenty of guys who will be smaller than him at that position. And I do think that his strength will allow him to maybe even operate as a bit of a post hub for the Raptors in some parts. Okay, moving on to Carlton Bub Carrington. Now, Bub Carrington, I've written 6'4". Some people say 6'5". He's always looked 6'4" to me. But anyways, some people have compared him to a Lou Williams type, right? Now, Carrington is a better shooter, in my opinion, than Collier, and he has this elite in between game that is really shifty. In both guys, we're talking about like dynamic, talented guards, but in Carrington, we're talking about more of a score first guard than with Collier, right? Like they can both score, they both have that shifty package, but yeah, there we go. 6'4", in no shoes. I mean, that's really 6'5", right? Like, let's be real. Like, I mean, people do not play basketball bare feet. So 6'5" in general. So he's going to be undersized at the two, or he's going to be minorly sized. You know who he really reminds me of, and this is going to come as a bit of a shock that I'm even suggesting drafting him, given the not so favorable things I've had to say about Gary Trent Jr. But it reminded me a little bit. Some of his shot making did remind me a little bit of Gary Trent Jr. and some of the ways that he gets off his shooting. The difference here is that his playmaking talent, in my opinion, and his overall ball handling at the same time, to look at both players side to side as college players, Gary Trent Jr., of course, at Duke, and then Bub Carrington. Um, he seems that his ball skills are probably ahead of Gary's. Now, neither player really finished at the rim, and I think like that three-level scoring element is weak. But here's the thing: I always think about prospects in terms of, if I could add this one thing, how realistic is it, and how would it help him? With Carrington, I think the one thing that I would add with him, because he has a little bit of length to him, right? He's about 6'4" with 6'8" wingspan, so he has that length. He has that Emmanuel quickly length, right? So with him, to teach him how to become a better finisher inside, I think would come down to the weight room, right? It's not that he hates contact or anything. He takes contact. It's just he often stops short on some of his drives, and he'll pull up for two, and he's pretty effective from there. So I'm not shading on the mid-range stuff, but truth be told, that's never going to be good for analytics. And if you're a late first round pick, they're not exactly giving you the green light to go and launch middies, right? So a lot of his game is going to be predicated on him becoming elite at some of the shot making stuff. So his three-point shooting percentage was not great last year, 32.2%, but I do trust that, the volume, and I trust that eventually it's a little bit Keontae George-esque, right? Like the shot profile and everything is a little Keontae George-esque, right? So I do trust that. But with strength, I think that he is shifty enough and long enough to be able to get more downhill, right? So again, shooting off the catch from 3-point range has been more or less, I think especially from the corners. I saw him struggle a lot from the corners. So watching him sort of struggle from those places makes me think that, he's not going to have that PJ Tucker or PJ Washington ability to just stand in the corner and hit 42% on catch and shoots. But this is something that can grow. This is something that can get better. There is a good base there for shooting. This is not like trying to turn Precious Achiuwa into a good shooter, or Kem Birch into a good shooter. Like, there is an existing base of shot making talent, and the ability to shoot off the bounce, I think, has been pretty good for him. And he's creative, and he does have a little bit of Isaiah Collier stuff. I've seen him make some pretty high level reads. So overall, I think his fit on the Raptors would be contingent on them moving off of Gary Trent Jr. and sort of developing him as the next up Gary Trent Jr. I wouldn't be thrilled about the Raptors necessarily drafting him at 19, but I wouldn't be upset either. Let's move on to Nikola Topic. Now, some people think, Rob, you're absolutely insane. Nikola Topic is not falling to 19. Well, he might. And, stranger things have happened. Last year, we were saying Cam Whitmore. There's no way Cam Whitmore is going to fall to 13. And then he fell right past 13, right? So there are players who fall, and injury concerns are one of those things. Scouts want to be sure. A lot of scouts didn't get to watch him. When they did watch him, they watched him with Mega. And, Mega is not necessarily emblematic of the type of role he would have in the NBA. So they want to see him up close. They want to see him in workouts. And now he's got the ACL tear. So, if the Raptors willing to be patient, which they've shown in the past, they were patient with OG Anunoby, and OG Anunoby was injured when he was drafted. And, he ended up clearing up for training camp. And with Topic, it might be the exact same thing. It might be a similar situation. So this is the same Raptors brass, roughly, that picked, Masai Ujiri especially, that picked OG Anunoby in 2016, 2017. And, they may have a similar leaning towards Nikola Topic. Also, like, it does not hurt that the Raptors have Darko Rajakovic. And SP saying, how well does Darko know Topic? That's hilarious. He knows him really, really well. And I can tell you that sort of on the record. He knows him extremely well. He knows his coaches extremely well. There's a lot of intel here that the Raptors could lean on with Darko, and you would be able to understand better the severity of his injury, the type of person he is. A lot of times I've found this is just a tried and true proven thing about the NBA draft is when teams call to try and, get intel on a particular player, they're often calling their family. They're often calling, teachers. They're often calling, old coaches. Well, it kind of, and this is why I think a lot of international players go under the radar, or sometimes maybe even become overrated. They're harder to get a read on because a lot of people, there's a language barrier, right? And you could say, okay, come on, Rob, like anyone can pay for a Serbian translator or anything to get, but it's still different. It's different when you're talking to somebody that doesn't speak your language. You're having to adjust your language a little bit. Things get lost in translation, etc. To have a fluid conversation sometimes is very important. And that's why I feel like the Raptors connection into this part of the world is very, very important through Darko Rajakovic. And this will, in my opinion, if he's on the board, I would be shocked out of my mind if the Raptors didn't take him. Like I would boycott like the draft. I would just, I don't know. We're doing a live draft. I think I might just shut off the. I would probably shut off the live stream if the Raptors pass up on him at 19. That being said, there's also potential to trade up for him. There are plenty of teams that are looking to get rid of late lottery picks, including the Sacramento Kings, etc. If he's there at 13, I would not mind moving 19 and Bruce Brown and taking on Harrison Barnes' contract or something if the Kings want to do that. I think the best you're going to get for Bruce Brown, honestly, is not a first round pick. I think what you're going to get is maybe a slight benefit or a boost on your first round pick. Like you might be able to move up a couple of spots in exchange for taking on a bad contract or something like that. I think Topic would be worth it. And if you have intel or you have a reason to believe that he won't slip past 15 or 16 or whatever, and again, therein lies the other thing, right? There's the Darko connection there as well. I mean, they can push him to Toronto. They can if they really want to. There's another thing about international players. They really have a trust issue with the NBA. They have seen how various international players, Roko Ukic comes to mind, Milos Vujanic comes to mind. There's so many guys who, especially in that part of the world, have felt like coming to the NBA could be the kiss of death, right? They might be misused, they may be misunderstood, etc. We've seen plenty of guys from the Balkans, like Mario Hezonja and guys like that, just not work out in the NBA. Darko Milicic, there's so many. And I'm not saying that those guys aren't at fault for not working on the NBA. I'm just saying there is a growing fear among international players that sometimes when you go over, you might end up in the wrong situation. And so there is extra work done on the agent side and also on the player side to make sure they land in the right situation. Every agent wants their player. I mean, I would hope every agent wants their player to end up in the right situation. But with Topic, it will be extra because he is also injured. He is also extremely young. And he is very, very, very high hopes in terms of Serbian basketball in the future. And you just don't want the future of your team's national team, one of the best young players in your country, to end up in a really terrible situation. There is a reason why earlier this year he was mocked as high as number one. Now, personally, I believe that any team that lets him slip past 9 is crazy and completely insane. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons of him. Honestly, the cons, some people say the shooting is a bit of a con. I see where they're coming at with that. His jump shot is not like pure or elite, but it is functional. And I trust his work ethic long term to become a really good jump shooter, especially off the bounce, and especially above the break. His playmaking is next level, talent. And most importantly, his downhill rim pressure, man. Like he's 6'6" and he sees the game like he is one of the few, like I'm saying, like 2 or 3 guys who are legit lottery talents in this draft, right? Um, and among those guys, if you believe the injury concerns are not the biggest, they're not going to be the end of the world. If you believe that he'll recover and have a full recovery and he won't have super complications from that, then yes, I think that he is one of the top 3 or 4 prospects in this draft. Would I say he'd be my number one pick? Probably not. He would probably be a top 4 pick for me. And with the injury concerns, I could see him slipping past 8 or 9. I think it would be crazy if he slipped past 12 or 13. So the Raptors, if they want him, they'll have to trade for one of those high lottery picks. But if the injury, if the medicals are scary, if maybe they want to not share his medicals with other teams or whatever, if the Raptors can just say, hey, like, we'll just here, we're, if they just say, we're going to not share his medicals. You know what I mean? With the teams, we have a promise from the Raptors at 19. He wants to go there, etc. He wants to be in Toronto. That would be a very scary proposition. Um, mm, Again, it's an international thing, right? Long term, the Raptors have shown an ability here, and we have Darko. I think there is a chance that they could try to push him to Toronto. And honestly, if his camp ever sees this video, you should. You should push him. He would fit very well with what the Raptors do. It does worry me a little bit defensively. His defense is not great. His lateral quickness is not great, and his length is not nearly going to be enough to make up for that. His size is going to be helpful. He is very intelligent. So he could buy in as a team defender. His hands are pretty good, hand-eye coordination. So he could at best become a passable defender. That's not what you want to hear, especially with RJ Barrett and Grady Dick on the roster long term. So naturally, if you could build a version of this player, they would be a very good defender. But if that player existed, even with an injury, they would be the first pick in this draft. So there's going to be warts with any player the Raptors pick up. Now, Yves Missi is one of my favorite bigs in this draft and has been for a really long time. Now, I watched a ton of games from him. Like, I think I've watched Yves Missi more than any player because he is so raw, and he's so new to basketball. He's only picked up basketball 3-4 years ago, and he's from Cameroon. So there's a little bit of precedence with the Raptors having picked Christian Koloko and Pascal Siakam, that he would not only be familiar with the organization and Masai Ujiri, etc., but Masai Ujiri would also be very familiar with him. And this is not one of those Masai Ujiri likes African players. Actually, this is more of a Rob really likes Yves Missi video. Um, I love him. His fervor and intensity that he plays with is incredible. His intelligence, not as a basketball player, but rather just as a person, is very inspiring. He has like this emotional intelligence that makes me like really like wow, I can't believe he is that age. You know what I mean? The way that he handled losses, the way that he handled tough calls, the way that he handled adversity, it was all really impressive. His athletic profile is honestly elite for a big. And I know a lot of people compare him to Clint Capella because I think that's just like the most obvious thing. And I know that he didn't shoot well at the combine. And I realized that a lot of people are just going to pigeonhole him into this type of player. But honestly, man, like going forward, I really could see him become like a Pascal Siakam. Like, I'm not kidding, and I'm not making that comparison because they're both from Cameroon. But dude, this guy, like, he can take a center or a power forward. He's taken guards off the dribble. Like, he'll try anything, and he's absolutely insane for it. The passion that he plays, the passion that he has for basketball and his compete level is absolutely insanity. His defensive versatility, like his ability to switch out onto guards, was very impressive. His overall just rolling potential and vertical lob threat potential. I've wanted Scotty Barnes to have a big like this for a long time. But where he's really special, as I mentioned, alluded to earlier, was just as a defender. Some of the stuff that he can do. Now, weaknesses, there are plenty of weaknesses. His basketball IQ is very low. But I don't want to say that as like a disparaging remark, like, okay, it's Precious Achua, like he's just stupid when it comes to basketball. No, he's just really inexperienced. He hasn't been coached up correctly, but he has shown an ability to grow through coaching. And I have seen that with him from his earlier tape to now that he does get better at things. Okay. One of the things that was particularly frustrating was how much attention he would draw on an offensive rebound and how many times he would force an offensive rebound back into, over length, over a bigger defender, stronger defender. I think with added strength and with more experience, he'll become a better passer. Now, the passing thing isn't there right now. And a lot of bigs that we're going to discuss in this part, they're going to be passers. Almost all the players that we're discussing are good playmakers. The previous players we've all discussed, good playmakers. With Yves Missi, I don't know if he's going to be a good playmaker. I can just hope that he'll become better at it, but it's not an existing talent of his. But where I think he could thrive is in transition and as a rebounder, as a shot blocker, as a rim runner, as an eraser, as a screener, um, as a big who can actually switch out and really bother length. And I think eventually, I think he'll be able to pick and pop a little bit. I don't think he's going to be a total non-shooter at all. His hand-eye coordination is honestly stuff of legends. I see him as a lottery pick in this draft, and I know that's crazy because he's super raw. Um, but bro, like, LeVar Ball saying he gives me young Ibaka vibes. I watched a lot of young Serge Ibaka. I see where you're coming from. Serge was a better shooter though at this stage. He was a better shooter. But, honestly, like I've And in fairness, I didn't watch Serge Ibaka play college basketball because he didn't play college basketball. So I had to go on tape that was super grainy and, I was just getting hype on Serge Ibaka back then. But had Serge Ibaka played college basketball, he might have been exposed a little bit too, because here in college basketball, you're playing against players who are, they're like 22, 21, whatever, typically. They're older. College basketball players are getting a little bit older because of NIL deals, etc. And also they're bigger, stronger than you, and they're way more experienced than you. You're playing against guys who've been playing a sport since they were 5 years old. That being said, he was still extremely productive. Um, Again, defensively, he's great. I think the free throw shooting is a little scary. Some people, Kevin O'Connor here has questioned his conditioning. Saying he just plays 20 minutes per game. I think his conditioning is fine, personally. Okay, let's move on from Yves Missi, and I think he would slot in really well as a future forward. Now let's talk about Kyle Filipowski, Flip as they call him, T-Rex arms as they call him in other parts. Look, man, a lot of people are really down on Kyle Filipowski, but Kyle Filipowski was being mocked as high as like the mid first round last year. Now he talks at length about a hip injury that he had, which kept him out of developing last off season, and how that maybe there's a little bit more potential to him, and maybe his potential is more akin to um like a freshman, you know what I mean? Because he lost that 1 year, and I do think that losing time due to injury is a real thing, and some of that development does get like sort of like sucked into a vacuum, and you can unlock it. But that being said, his weaknesses are real and his strengths are real. His strengths as a shooter are immense. As a playmaker, I think he has really good ball skills. Like, to have a 7-footer like this who can pass, dribble, shoot, truly, truly something. He moves his feet a little bit better on the perimeter than a lot of people really give him credit for. So even though he's not going to be erasing shots at the rim because he doesn't really have the length or the athleticism to do that, he is an intelligent guy who can probably factor into a team defense. A lot of people rate him as a higher level prospect than Kelly Olynyk. Who better to learn from than Kelly Olynyk? He'll have Kelly Olynyk behind him. It really fits schematically with what the Raptors want to do. I don't think he'll be a negative defender at the end of his career. I think by the time he's a prime guy, I think he'll be like a neutral defender in the NBA. But his shooting is very good. 35% 3-point shooter. He can rebound. He will get stronger. He has great post playmaking upside, and just transition. Like if he can rebound and just throw an outlet pass, there might be a little bit of that Kevin Love outlet passing stuff with him. And I think he'll just really fit in culturally to what the Raptors want to do. He's really like not a bad kid or anything like that. He does like um yeah, like, his post stuff, scoring near the rim, I don't necessarily think that's right now, but get some NBA strength and conditioning on him, and I think he'll have, like, a little midi turnaround or something of that sort to play with. Um, yeah, overall, I have been very low on, Kyle Filipowski, but at 19, you know what I mean? Like, I was low on him when he was being talked about at 10, 11, 12, 13 range. Um at 19, I'm fine with it. I don't think it's the greatest thing. I think you're pretty much settling into what is guaranteed to be a role player. There's almost zero star potential there. But yeah, now let's talk about DaRon Holmes from Dayton. 6'8", grew to 6'10". I see a lot of Jared Allen in him, man. I do. He has the only thing about his game that even remotely and Jared Allen plus shooting. Okay, so he shot like I think 43% from three this past year. Still a little bit of a subpar free throw shooter, but I think overall, like, he can make defenses pay for leaving them alone. There is stuff in his game that can be very, very beneficial to the Toronto Raptors schematically. He provides rim protection. He is decent on switches. I think there's a little bit of passing with him and some guard skills because, at times you're watching a game and he's bringing the ball up the court for Dayton, which is pretty cool and probably not something that he's going to be asked to do in the NBA, but maybe is something that he can build into long term. I think that he is a really good pick and roll player. I think he's a really good screener. Okay. And he's really intelligent. He's a really smart guy. He seems to make the right reads. And again, like, he can be a bit of a zone buster in the middle of the floor. I do think his movement on the court. Like, I heard somebody say the other day that they could see him playing wing, and I'm like, nah, no, I don't see this guy as a wing at all. He is a big through and through based on how he moves, and his movement is it's clunky, it's disjointed, it's rigid, it's kind of robotic, and that does not project well to being a good scorer, in my opinion. It may project, it kind of locks you into role player stuff. And honestly, like if you look at OG Anunoby move around the basketball court, or Joey Graham move around the basketball court, you understand what I'm talking about, right? There are certain people that just do not have a very fluid movement pattern, and yeah, it's not going to be a great thing for him. Again, intelligent basketball player, makes good passes, sometimes can be a little bit turnover prone, in a couple of games that I watched, can get a little bit rushed on certain things. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, like this is earlier in the draft cycle, I saw him as more of a target at 31. 19 feels okay. It's not great. I would be very upset if the Raptors picked him over Yves Missi, because I think Yves Missi has long term a far greater ceiling, but the floor on DaRon Holmes is serviceable NBA big. The worst thing that this guy is going to be is like a slightly better version of Kem Birch. Okay. The best thing he can be is, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what the best version of him is, but the best version of him is a starting NBA player. Um, Yes, and LeVar Ball saying, "Didn't he get a promise one of these days?" Yes, he has shut down workouts. He has gotten a promise. There are quite a few promises in the NBA draft. At 31, so the all-you-can-eat wings. Okay, we're going all three wings here, and we're going to start out with what many scouts believe is the best defender in the draft, and that's Ryan Dunn from Virginia. 6'7", 6'6", depending on who you believe. Looked about 6'7" to me, and really, Sam Vecini went kind of famous for calling Scotty Barnes a zero level scorer. Sam Vecini, if you ever watch this is what a zero level scorer actually looks like, and that's Ryan Dunn. Now, a lot of people are going to, tell themselves, hey, like, we don't play guys like this in the NBA anymore. You can't be a zero level offensive player and even play 1 minute in the NBA anymore, no matter how good you are defensively. And a lot of people compared him to Matisse Thybulle, Jared, Jaden McDaniels, not Jared, Jaden McDaniels, Herb Jones, etc. I do think the defensive upside is really actually that high. Some of the stuff that he's done defensively is really, really cool. Um, I don't understand why his shot doesn't go in more than it does, because there were games that you watch where he's burying turnaround middies, you know what I mean? So I wonder if this is just a couple of tweaks and the Raptors can just make him functional. Now, I do think he has one redeemable skill on offense, and that is passing. And overall, if you get the defense and you got the passing, and occasionally you got a little bit of rim running and pick and roll stuff with him, maybe if you could just develop a corner 3-point shot, like, he would be a lock to go top 15 in this draft, right? So he's not that far off. Now, he is one of the older players eligible for the draft, but he has that typical Raptors profile. Okay, he's got the 6'7", 7'2" wingspan type of profile. And I think that for the Raptors, who have had a lot of experience developing players like this, players like OG, players like Scotty, etc., that this is going to feel like a very familiar archetype, and maybe too much of a good thing to pass up at 31. Nathan Taylor saying, in high school he was a 40% shooter but had a major growth spurt and forgot how to shoot. Well, we'll see if any of that comes back in the NBA. But yes, he was very limited offensively. He didn't really understand how to, decelerate or dribble or, shoot off the dribble. There are a lot of guys who shoot pretty okay in high school, and then it falls off a cliff in college. He's not the only one. He's not the first. He won't be the last. All right. Um, yeah, you know what? That is the floor on him. Patrick McCaw is pretty much the floor on a player like Ryan Dunn, but I think the upside could be a Herb Jones. And again, Herb Jones was like, I think 23 or 24 years old when he was drafted as a rookie, and he went to the second round right around this range. Well, he was in the 40, and we see what Herb Jones has become, right? So you have to really get a sense of why his shooting is the where it is. You have to get an idea of how much skill development, dollars, and time you're going to put into him, how much he really wants to get better. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the prospects that I looked at, one of the things that I really looked at was their interviews, and I wanted to get an idea of how much they really seem to love basketball. Really get an idea of, and it's a couple of guys that we're going to talk about, coming up. They really love basketball, and I think that loving basketball is such a quintessential part of this because when basketball gets hard, are you still gonna love it, right? When you're not starting anymore, when you're doing, runs in Mississauga with the 905, for months on end, when you're buried, when you're a two-way guy, are you still gonna love it? Because it doesn't come with all the frills. Everyone doesn't recognize you. You're not the guy anymore. It's not like high school where, basketball is like a social card that you get to play. I mean, yeah, sure, you're playing the NBA. Congratulations. But so you gotta really love this sport to withstand, being a second round pick, two-way contract, being bounced around, inconsistent minutes, all that stuff. And I just think like Ryan Dunn loves basketball. It's like one of the things that I just walked away feeling from all his tape, that this guy just loved to play the game of basketball. Um, Maybe there's a little bit of Peyton Watson there as well. Like this was another guy, Peyton Watson, where he was considered like a zero level scorer, and he's developed a little bit now. He still was largely unplayable in the playoffs for the Denver Nuggets this past year, but he started to hit the three a little bit more. And Peyton Watson was another guy that I had like top 25 in the draft in 2022. And most people had him top 50. Some people had him going outside top 50. So again, the Denver Nuggets saw in Peyton Watson, first round talent. I see in Ryan Dunn, early second round talent. He's not necessarily my favorite guy at this range, but I do like him. Now we get to Johnny Furphy, and this is here's what it comes down to. I've watched more Johnny Furphy than any player outside of Yves Missi. I don't know why. Kansas was probably one of my favorite teams to watch this year, anyways, just because I was like, hey, the Raptors drafted Grady Dick. The Raptors traded for Ochai Agbaji. Let me watch a lot of Kansas because chances are they're going to be really interested in someone from this program. And Johnny Furphy is one guy that really stuck out. He's 6'9". He has real guard skills at that position, which is pretty cool. I think his defense is like a lot of people are going to draw, non-defender vibes from it. I don't think he's a non-defender. I think he has crazy wingspan and, pretty good instincts defensively. So he will really have an uphill battle in terms of strength, coordination, boosting his lateral ability, whatever. He doesn't do well off of screens, so he's not battling over screens very well. But again, a lot of this just could come down to the fact that he's physically very underdeveloped. But at his size, he has real movement shooter potential. The other thing that he has, which is something that I remember Darko Rajakovic talking a lot about with Bruce Brown, was his off ball, like his cutting, like his ability to cut behind the basket, his ability to make intelligent reads. One of the things that I noticed with Johnny Furphy is very rarely, if ever, did I see him. There you go. There's like the perfect cut right there, and he just cuts right behind the defense and just goes up for the dunk. So he has like elite ability, I think, in transition as a cutter. Um, like he has other things in his game other than shooting. Now the shooting was mediocre. 35% for a guy who's branded as a shooter was pretty mediocre. The fact that he couldn't really do it off the dribble is a little bit concerning. But movement shooting doesn't always have to be off the dribble. He can relocate. He relocates really well, actually. He has a good instinct for where his man is. He has a good instinct for cutting behind the defense. And I think for the Raptors, point 0.5 offense, they're always looking for guys who are skilled decision makers. And he has this athletic profile that really reminds me a lot of Grady Dick, right? Like in terms of like 6'8". Now right here, Kevin O'Connor has him listed as 6'8" wingspan. I don't know where those numbers are coming from. If that's coming from a combine, I apologize. But watching him um, was kind of crazy. You know what I mean? Like for real, like that was really hard to imagine that his wingspan is really 6'8". That's crazy. Like it seems at least 6'10", 6'11" to me. He's long. Like he just feels longer than 6'8". Um, Kevin O'Connor is written here, offers little resistance defending quicker players due to lack of foot speed, length, and strength. He got roasted by Baylor in a premier matchup this season. Opposing ball handlers targeted him all game until he was pulled early in the second half. Even off the ball, he's slow to fight through screens while trailing his man. No lies detected there, right? So again, like he is going to get targeted just like Grady got targeted, and obviously if you're the Toronto Raptors, you might say, hey, like what's the upside? We're going to have two of these guys, like two guys who are long white movement shooters who, don't hold much of a hope or a prayer in terms of point of attack defense. But again, I actually think long term, if he builds out, he could actually morph into maybe like a more advanced version of a Duncan Robinson. That would be cool, right? That would be really cool. And that would be huge, huge upside at 31, right? So I believe he has a first round promise. I don't think he's going to fall here because he turned down a pretty lucrative NIL deal to stay in this draft. And so he skipped, Jameer Watkins went back, Baba Miller went back. There's a lot of good players, that I think would have been in consideration for the Raptors, but he didn't. So chances are he's probably going 20s. There might even be a teens promise for Johnny Furphy. I think that with development, the best version of Johnny Furphy is better than most players in this draft. Okay, let's move on. I also think, like to bring this up, he's also a pretty good rebounder, and I think that will compensate for some of his point of attack woes. Now, Pacome Dadiet, really interesting player. Some people like. I think he's just crafty for a guy who's really. He's one of the youngest players in the draft. If you know, I think he might be the youngest player in the draft, if I'm not mistaken. Really crafty. Like he has like this really cool arsenal of counters, and he has like a lazy comparison is, of course, I don't understand where Michael Finley came from, but I see a little bit of Jaime Jaquez in his game, right? Now again, really hard to tell, right? Where this guy's game is going to go given his age, given the competition level that he faced, and where he was playing and the role that he was playing. I think this could be a very Raptorsy pick at 31, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Raptors exit 2021 with Yves Missi and Pacome Dadiet. I'm a very happy person because the 905 is going to be really fun to watch next year. But make no mistake about it, he will be spending a lot of time in the 905 if he's drafted by the Raptors. Like, I'm not saying like he's rawer than the average player or whatever, but there's going to be a massive speed adjustment to the NBA for him. I think he has a pretty good feel and good IQ for the game. And overall, I think it's just about reps sometimes, reading the double, reading where it's coming from, knowing when to pass, when to shoot, getting all the way to the basket instead of settling for mid-range jumpers. Sometimes I think this is just going to be a matter of finding the right fit for him and finding the right development situation and finding the right team-oriented offense to unlock a player like him. There were many times last year when I looked at Jaime Jaquez and I was thinking to myself, I wish the Raptors had drafted Jaime Jaquez because he just really fits with what the Raptors want to do. Well, Jaime was, underrated as a prospect because he was a little bit older. Pacome is on the other end of the extreme, in terms of age. And I do think he could be better than Jaime Jaquez at the same age. So again, Jaime was drafted as a senior. I think he was 22. Pacome is 18. So, I mean, you have 3 years, 4 years to get him caught up to where Jaime Jaquez currently is. And that means, physically he's already pretty good. I do find him to be a little bit bottom heavy a little bit with his feet. Maybe heavy feet could be the right word for it. So I'm not really sure that he's ever going to be able to guard guards, but I do think he should be able to guard wings, and people project him to be more of a 3-and-D type. Physically reminds me a little bit of Anthony Black, but I don't know how much of that I'm being fooled into thinking because of the physical appearance of him that he keeps reminding me of Anthony Black. But yes, Anthony Black was a better athlete in my opinion. But yes, let's move on. Undrafted two-way guys, the road less traveled. So this is one guy that the Raptors will definitely be looking at because Scotty has been pushing him. He spent a year in community college, didn't have a single first, Division I scholarship. Comes from West Palm Beach, so Scotty's very familiar with him. And actually, apart from being very familiar, he's actually one of Scotty Barnes' best friends, and that's Jonathan Mogbo. So San Francisco, 6'8", really wide shoulders. All year kept thinking this guy reminds me of a cross between Draymond Green and Kevon Looney. So I'm pretty sure he's going to become a warrior at some point. He is a really, really, really interesting like passer and playmaker in the middle of the floor. And that combined with his incredible screen setting and his rebounding make him a very valuable role player. The problem is, dude can't shoot. Like he can't shoot at all. So this is the skill part that for the Toronto Raptors, you can look at it and say, okay, what's easier? And by the way, this is a savage player comparison from the Ringer, shades of Ben Simmons if he was a hooper. Um, okay, let's not get crazy. He's nowhere near the coordinated athlete that Ben Simmons was. He's nowhere near the offensive, player that Ben Simmons was. But that being said, a big guy who can do some of the stuff that he can do in transition could be very useful. As a rebounder, he has like maybe Reggie Evans type upside as a rebounder. Okay. Unlike Reggie, and he has incredible screening. Like the screens that he sets, like his wide shoulders, his solid base, like this is grown man strength. And he has it at this age, right? So this is like a linebacker type of, strength. And he can play a little bit of point forward for you, but I think ultimately this is going to be a small ball center. He has like that wingspan to play center, 6'7", 6'8", but ultimately 7'2", 7'3" wingspan, and he's going to be able to guard up a position. So I think there's a little bit of like I don't necessarily see like Rob Williams type of upside as a shot blocker, but I think Draymond meets you know, Draymond Green meets Reggie Evans meets Kevon Looney is probably where I go with this, right? Now that's the best case scenario, but I really like players who have like the ability to switch up a position. Like he can guard wings for sure. Like I would trust him on a Jason Tatum as much as I would trust him on an Al Horford, as much as I would trust him on a Jalen Brown. Like I could pretty much put him on all three players, and I would trust that he wouldn't get completely killed. Now he's not gonna be stopping them. He's not OG Anunoby, but he's gonna do about as good a job as any rookie in this class on those guys. And I think that combined with like he does so many things well that you start thinking about like role player potential, and you say this guy could come off the bench and do what he does well for 10 minutes a night and help us every single night. Now, the not shooting part, I understand, but you already have Jakob Poeltl, and he does a lot of the same stuff as Jakob Poeltl, to be honest with you, right? The difference is he has SP saying sounds like Dorian Finney-Smith. He is not. In my opinion, he is not. So I could see him being like the Raptors pick at 31. That would be a little high, but if he goes undrafted, I think the Raptors should be the first team that makes the call to Jonathan Mogbo because honestly, when I'm looking at the Raptors past undrafted guys, right? They all kind of fit this mold, don't they? They all kind of fit like this undersized big who has wingy potential, right? You look at a guy like Ron Harper, right? Like Ron Harper was like a 2, 3, 4. I mean, he had kind of like the staunch build, the big build of a 4. You look at Justin Champagnie, he was a guy who had kind of like big man skills in a wings body, right? And they were trying to hone out some of the wing stuff, and they brought Justin Champagnie to being a much better, you know, um, shooter. Like by the time he left the Toronto Raptors, he was a much better shooter. So, if Mogul can become like even a competent shooter, like he will be an NBA player for 10 years. He has that other stuff. And I think that that's the thing that you're going to look for as the Toronto Raptors is how much do guard skills in a big man's body matter to us if he can't shoot? And how much do we trust that we can turn him into a shooter? I think that he would be a really interesting player to look at in the undrafted heap. Apologize, missed up there. Um, okay. So yeah, I mean, just some of the passes, like there was some advanced playmaking stuff with him, right? Like it was really interesting, and a lot of people had him going undrafted. He seems to be rising up a lot of draft boards. He is one of the oldest players in the draft. I see him being like, honestly, if I had to guess right now, where's he going? I'm guessing he's going to go 44 to 50, somewhere in there. So if the Raptors can trade a future second to get him, I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. But if he falls outside that range, I definitely think he's worth it. Not going to talk a hell of a lot about Tristan Newton. I think most people on this channel watched the NCAA tournament, are pretty familiar with Newton at this point. Not really a clear specialist in any way, just a glue guy who does everything, a little bit of everything, not a supreme athlete, not, but again, 23 years old, not a specialist, kind of a bit of a generalist, does a little bit of everything well. These types of players typically are not high on scouts draft boards because there's no clear role for them in the NBA. But he's a winner. And, the last 2 years winning a national championship as a starter, maybe that should mean something, right? What's the best version of him? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I couldn't get down to that with him. This scouting report compares him to DeLon Wright. I see where they're coming from with that. I'm not really sure. Maybe like a really watered down Mike Conley without, if he can figure out the 3-point jump shooting, I think that would go a very, very long way to easing some of the doubts about him. But he could go undrafted. And I think if you're looking at this purely from a position of having talent in your organization, having good players, good people in your organization, watered down Lonzo Ball, I don't think so. No. No, I don't see that anywhere near that level of, playmaking upside with him, but he does have, like, really good connective playmaking and, yeah, I mean, like, as a defender, I like him, overall. LeVar Ball saying Chris Dunn. That's getting closer into the range. Yeah. So yeah, so I think overall, like this is a player that can run your program in the 905, and he could probably just table the offense. He can set everyone up. This is a perfect culture setter. Honestly, a little bit Jeff Doughtony. Okay, like this type of player, just very solid. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes. It's very Jeff Doughtony, right? So yeah, I think Jeff Doughton might be a really good comparison for Cam. Okay, and finally, my favorite player in the world. No, in this draft, no player has quite captured my sentiments as much as Isaiah Crawford. A lot of injuries. Okay, like a couple of big injuries a few years ago, and a lot of people have written him off as an NBA prospect. Didn't even get invited to the NBA draft combine. But man, 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 I love this dude. And I have a feeling that somebody is going to see what he's worth and take him way higher. He just has that feel. Like I have a feeling this is the type of prospect that teams fall in love with. Okay, so again, missed a ton of time in his third year. He is a 5-year player at Louisiana Tech, holds like almost every record imaginable at Louisiana Tech, a place where Karl Malone played. I believe he retired. He exits with what was it? It was 1,000 points, 500 rebounds, something like that. It was like he's the only player to do it, right? And some people will point to the competition, Conference USA, not exactly the greatest competition, not exactly playing anybody, but I see a player who improved every single year. I see a guy who turned himself into a 40, 41, and 42% three-point shooter over the last 2 years. I see a guy who's averaging, dude, per 100 possessions, Isaiah Crawford averages 6.9 stocks per game. I can't think of the last time I saw a player do that. Okay. Okay. So there's obviously some weaknesses here, and we can talk about it. Okay. The weaknesses are he's not very quick. He's not very bursty. How much of that is him recovering from the injury? I don't know. But honestly, he reminds me so much of OG Anunoby. It's absolutely insane. Now, is that just leaning on the physical profile? Maybe. It's just the way he runs. Is that a good thing? Is it a good thing that a prospect runs like OG? Maybe not. Maybe it's not the best thing, but his love for the game is unquestionable. His coachability is unquestionable. His role player upside is unquestionable. And if there's one player in this draft that really does remind me of Herb Jones, apart from Ryan Dunn, it is this guy. Unlike Ryan Dunn, however, he has a lot more injury history. Unlike Ryan Dunn, however, he has a 3-point jump shot that actually works. And while you could say, okay, well, the free throw shooting is not great, it's like 73%. I get that. I get that. But um, Ryan Dunn has 8.5 stocks per 100. Amazing. So I stand corrected. Ryan Dunn is even more productive on this end of the floor. Um, it's still pretty rare to have a player to be that productive defensively and to do it the way that he's doing it. Honestly, is what's been most impressive. So I'm not suggesting taking him at 31, but I am saying if he falls off the draft, he should be one of the first players that the Raptors call. Again, the 905 have the potential to be really interesting next year, especially with all these young players, all these rookies coming in. I do think that if I were to grade this draft from 19 to 70 in terms of prospects, 19 to 70, it's pretty good. Like relative to what people think a draft should yield you between 19 and 70, this draft is pretty average. Like it's good to average. And so it stands to reason that this is probably one of the best years to have, a couple of undrafted two-way slots open, to be able to do that. Um, I think he'll be a really solid role player in the NBA. I think he's like one of those rare undrafted guys that actually has a chance to carve out a role in the NBA. Maybe it will never be a role more than 10, 12 minutes a night. Maybe it'll only be, you know, 10th guy, 13th guy on the roster. But I think if you're going to have a 13th guy on the roster, wouldn't it be a versatile defender who can guard three possessions? I would love that. Wouldn't it be a guy who can just stand in the corner and hit threes, even if the ball handling and the driving and some of the deceleration, acceleration stuff, the creation stuff never comes along? Could you just have like a 3 and D role player that can really guard his position and guard up a position and deal with some mismatches? Could he become a really could he become a small ball five? You know what I mean? Like that could be interesting. So yeah. Anyways, overall, I think the Toronto Raptors are sitting in a really good part of the NBA draft. I do. I think they're going to have plenty of options. And I do believe that being how flat this draft is, they are hoping that someone really good drops to 19 and then they hit lottery twice and someone really good drops to 31. Yesterday, Zach Edey did his, or yesterday, a few days ago, Zach Edey did his post game, his interviews after the practice, and they were talking to him, and then they intercut that with Dan Tolzman, and he sort of alluded to the fact that, hey, 31 could go either way. Either it can be a trade chip or it could be this. And I do think that 31 could be a really interesting trade chip, and the fact that the draft lottery, sorry, the first round is taking place at 8 o'clock. And then the next day, we have a full 16 hours, 18 hours, 18, hold on, 20 hours. So we have a full 20 hours between the first round and second round. Second round is at 4 p.m. the next day. So I believe in that, in the 20 hours that the Raptors will be able to source, a ton of offers. And maybe, that means moving down in the second round in exchange for future assets. Maybe that means, an upgrade on Bruce Brown. And maybe that's when that trade gets done. I'll be very curious to see if Bruce Brown remains on the Raptors roster through free agency. That would be a really, really big disappointment. And, to touch on this in the 2 minutes I have left, because I don't want this to become over an hour, I do think that there's a bit of a element of Bruce Brown being connected to that Pascal Siakam thing, right? Because he was traded for Pascal Siakam. You didn't get a hell of a lot for him. And so everyone's just kind of like waiting for like, okay, well, let's see what the Pascal Siakam thing turns into. And maybe internally the Raptors feel a certain pressure to get something really great for Bruce Brown, or at least turn Bruce Brown into a serviceable player for them so that they have something tangible they can hold on to. Because I'm not sure Jordan Nwora is going to be back and Kyra Lewis is already on to his next team. So it's not like, do you know what I mean? Like you used Kyra Lewis and you used that OKC pick to get Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk, so maybe you can sell yourself on some idea of that, given that, Otto Porter was basically retiring and the Utah Jazz probably knew that. But I don't think you need to get something for Bruce Brown in order to validate that Pascal Siakam trade is good or bad. I think it is what it is, and just move on. I don't think picking up Bruce Brown's team option and holding on to him, and praying that someone will get desperate at the trade deadline. I promise you there's 10 players that make less money than him that are better at the stuff that he does than him that will probably be available for less than what you want. So this idea of Bruce Brown is a champion and Bruce Brown's this, like, dude, the longer you hold on to him, the more Bruce Brown is just a guy who is massively overpaid. Um, if you lose Bruce Brown for nothing, it's okay. Exactly. It's the sunk cost fallacy. It's like, okay, we went for a guy, it didn't work, let's move on. If you watched my 2K trade rebuild yesterday, that's how I operate. I don't care if something isn't working, you just move on. Okay. Like you don't have to wait 6 months, 10 months, 11 months, whatever. Um, Jordan saying Toronto will not make the playoffs until 2028. Bet money they will. They will. They 100% will. 2 seconds this draft for Bruce. Yeah, but I mean, again, at some point you have to ask yourself, what do you need 2 seconds for? Anyways, yeah, I'm not trying to stockpile like, fringy players. Roster spots are a very valuable thing. I think there are times when a player is waived. Maybe it's an X lottery flame out that you maybe think you have a chance with, or, granted, the Raptors haven't had a lot of success with that. Anthony Bennett comes to mind. Stanley Johnson comes to mind. But sometimes, having that additional roster flexibility is good. So I don't want to be carrying any players who don't have a chance do not belong on the roster. I feel like Ron Harper, after I saw a couple of months of that, I was just like, okay, cut your losses. Let's move on, right? And I think there are a lot of players like that where it's just like, maybe it's just best to move on. Anyways, all right. There's a guy that looks like OG on defense. I don't remember what school he went to. Isaiah Crawford, right? Isn't that who we're talking about? Okay. I'm only saying that so it feels better when I'm wrong. That's hilarious. Yeah, a lot of people do that. They set the bar artificially low so that they're not disappointed when things turn out disappointing. But I am open to disappointments. I'm going to say the Raptors are going to compete for the playoffs next year. All right. Talk to y'all later. Peace. Have a good one. Hit subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. Also, a little channel shout out. Go check out Godiology's last couple of videos. They're really awesome. And he just dropped one on knowing who will win the NBA Finals. I'm going to be doing my own finals preview either later today or tomorrow morning. So be on the lookout for that. A lot of data, a lot of thoughts on, who will win the finals between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, my mind has been mainly focused on playoffs, etc., but I have been watching a lot of the draft. So yeah, it's been interesting. Like I haven't been posting a lot about the draft. I've been making a lot of videos about the draft, but there's so many players, man. Like when you're talking 19 to 31, you're talking about really like a pool of 40 players that you have to look at. 40 players. So you're talking about all those late lottery guys that could fall, right? And you're also talking about all those really late second round guys who could rise up to 31. It's a really big list. I'll remind you, when the Raptors took Pascal Siakam at 27, most mock drafts had him at 45. So really the chances that the Raptors are going to draft two players that are exactly on this list is hard to believe. But yes, FA, I'm so sorry, dude. I gotta bounce. I know you're calling in, but I'll let you on for a minute, man. What's going on?
Hey, I'm good. I just saw the stuff open. I said, let me join. So, yeah, you can bounce. That's fine. I'll join another time.
Yeah, I got like 5 minutes. What's up?
I saw your popped earlier, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to come on to. I was just joining to listen to your recording.
Hmm.
Then I like, oh, it's still live. So like, let me just pop in quickly.
What do you
Nothing
want to talk?
much. Just looking at the draft and thinking of who we're going to draft at 19. Saw the Zakidi workout yesterday, and then
Okay,
listen, I think it's a possibility the Raptors will draft him if he falls to 19.
you think? Okay, so I did not talk about Zach Edey at all in this video because I don't necessarily see the upside on him. Why do you like him?
It's not whether I like him or not, but listening to the interview right from Tosman, you can glean a lot into it. He's saying that okay, that he's really worked on his game, like he's worked on his shooting, and also that
What? Okay, so
he-
here's a question. Let's say Dan Tolzman absolutely hates Zach Edey as a prospect. What do you expect him to say? They do this with
he-
Canadian prospects every year, man. They do this every year. They want to
yeah,
help
but
Canadian
if you
prospects.
hate him as a prospect, then why bring him in? And that was his first workout, right?
It's home, bro. Like they work out. I can't remember the last time there was a draft eligible Canadian the Raptors didn't work out. But like, dude, he doesn't fit what we're trying to do offensively or defensively at all.
How do you know they're not going to trade Jakob on draft 9-10? That will become the
He's not
pick.
Jakob Pertl. He's not even close. He's not
Yeah.
as he like I saw this comment on Real GM yesterday. I'm only comfortable picking Jakob Pertl, picking Zach Edey if they trade Jakob Pertl. It's like, what do you expect Zach Edey to do in the NBA next year? You expect him to start and be a positive impact player like Jakob Pertl? You know how far he is from that.
Yeah, but I think we're not going to win it on. We still have about a year or two to go, right? So you're rebuilding, so to speak.
Okay, but like even on the maximum upside, you're going to have a player who's going to be helpless in switches. You're going to have a player who's relegated to being a drop big, and you're going to have one of the slowest players in the NBA.
And you can't say the slowest player because even in the
He is
agility
slow,
test, he did way better than all the other folks that Klingon and even than Alessa, right? He did way better than Alessa.
but that's
In the
not. But you're talking about two of the guys who did the worst, and you're saying he did better than those guys,
but they're
right?
centers, right? That
Well,
we're
I mean,
comparing.
okay, but do you okay? But like, Yves Missi is a center. Did he do better than him? You know what I mean? Like, I
I'm not big on Yves Missi, to be honest. Can shoot the ball.
I
If I'm gonna go on a center that, then I'll go Collier where I know he can shoot and he can do other things.
Oh
Even though that,
man, we are
yeah,
so far apart on
we're,
our prospects because
yeah.
I can't stand Collier, bro. I really
I,
can't. Like if the Raptors pick Collier at 19, I'll be happy because that means they must have like met him and done all their due diligence. And maybe it's just,
you
sometimes
know,
people get a bad rep
so
for a
far
bad
on the
reason.
list
But
of centers that they're working at, right? It's only Collier and Zach Edey right now, except the ones that they worked at covertly.
did they work out Christian Coloco?
No, but I think didn't they work him out in the US? I thought they did.
Nope.
They didn't bring him
They
to
never
Canada.
worked him out. They never worked out Christian Coloco. I'm telling you, man. Like these guys, like people assume. So they were going to work out Christian Coloco. They would have had he had his visa issue not been a problem, but the visa issue was a problem, and they picked him. Okay, Pascal Siakam was the player they worked out. In where
In
did he?
Buffalo,
Buffalo.
with the,
Exactly. They worked out Pascal in Buffalo. Look, here's the thing. I don't think that the pre-draft workouts should be like gospel. Teams are rarely ever going to project who they're going to pick ever, right? They
okay,
have no.
quickly before you go, I know you have to run.
Yeah,
Do you think Nikola Topic is going to fall to 19? Nikola Topic
I hope so. I mean,
with the,
for
because
his sake,
it's gonna need surgery, right? So it's likely out for the next season.
I don't know if he's out for the next season,
The
but
turn is
you know who's going to
partially
have
torn
great
ACL.
intel on that? The Raptors because of
Yeah.
Darko Rajakovic, right? So yeah, I talked about it. Go watch the recording, whatever. I talked about
Okay,
why I
I'll
like
watch
him
it.
as well. But yeah, anyways, man, take care. Peace.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it now. Take care.
Yep.
Have a nice
Peace.
one.
Okay. So I just want to say if the Raptors draft Zach Edey or Collier at 19, you're gonna see me have a pretty big meltdown live. Um I'm not necessarily like I get why those guys are really good fits. I just think the best version of those players is worse than the best versions of some of the players that I talked about. And again, the floor on a player like Collier is okay. Well, like I think Collier is going to be playing the big three in like 5 years. That's my just interpretation of it. He strikes me as a very big three type of player, right? Um, I think he's going to have a lot of G League in his future. And like I get it. I totally get it. The athletic upside, the 3-point shooting, the shot blocking. In theory, he has every single thing that you would want from a modern center. In theory, when you watch him on a good day, he looks like Miles Turner. I don't see that. Zach Edey, same thing. Now I've come a lot further on Zach Edey. I see a lot of mock drafts having him late second round. I definitely think he's a first rounder. I just don't want him on the Raptors. That's it. So I'm not saying that he shouldn't be a first round pick anymore. I used to say that. I used to say there's no chance he should be picked in the first round. I changed my mind on that. I understand his screening potential, some of his pick and roll finishing, maybe some shooting upside, maybe a little bit of playmaking upside, maybe a little bit of defensive upside, but it doesn't schematically fit with a transition offense that the Raptors are trying to run. Quick hitters. I think he'll struggle with the speed that the Raptors want to play at. Anyways, all right. Talk to y'all later. Hit like, subscribe, and if you're looking for more content, definitely check out the video we dropped yesterday where we played out the next 12 months and Topic actually becomes a Raptor in that scenario. All right. Take care. Peace.